Welcome, everybody, to episode 8 of the Go Wild Avian Nutrition Podcast. I am Jason Crean, and I'm joined by my co-host, Evie Voltura. And also today, our guest is Shelley Innes. Did I say that right? Shelley Innes?
You did, yes.
Okay, perfect. And she is an Australian friend and colleague that we have been talking to. And we're going to talk today about why the wild matters, why knowing what birds are eating, parrots in particular, are eating and how they live, is important to us because we can't de-evolve a bird after it's developed over the species has developed over countless generations to live a certain way. So we have talked about this before in certain contexts, right, Dr. Evie? I think our episode with Bonnie Zimmerman, and she shared this from the Indonesian Parrot Project of all the different things that we see parrots eat. And to some of you watching this, it probably looks very foreign to what you're actually feeding them. But diversity is really what we push. We really want people to give their birds a diverse diet so that they are happy physically as well, physiologically as well as mentally, and keeping them engaged and used to change. So these were just some of the things that Bonnie had shared with us that birds eat. If you've read Dr. Evie's paper, that was published last year about what they found, what you have found in the research, right? As far as all of the different things reported that parrots have eaten, that's just the tip of the iceberg, right? And do you want to talk briefly about the Parrots Project and how our students at the university, for example, are helping you develop that?
Yeah, so the Parrots Project really is sort of a lifelong goal rather than a sort of small project. But the idea is that there is a fair amount of information about parrots out there in the literature and elsewhere, but it's scattered and not always easy to access. And so the idea is to try to gather as much of that data information and knowledge to ultimately create an interactive knowledge graph where we can do queries and searches to explore some unrealized connections and patterns. But the place that I am really interested in starting in with this is um, dietary habits and nutrition, since that is such a fundamental aspect of the well-being and overall health of all animals, humans included. And so, spanning from the alternate foodstuffs paper, we are working to document as much as we can about what has been reported that parrots are eating, both in the wild and in captivity. And, depending on what source you look at and whether you're a lumper or a splitter, there are somewhere between 385 and 425 species of parrots. So that's a little bit too much to tackle at one time. So we're actually focusing on Cockatuidae, the superfamily, so cockatiels and all of our cockatoos, of which we have one with us today. Um, and the whole point is really to better understand what these birds are doing in the wild, and what they can tolerate in captivity to get a better picture of what helps them stay healthy and what might be not as good for them, and just improve their lives in captivity, understand better what we need to be protecting in terms of resources in the wild. And lastly, I'll make a plug for humans. There may be things out there that these birds are eating that could be superfoods or crops that we may consider bringing into agricultural production sometime in the future, whether that's for the preservation of plant species or just because they are, not only good for birds, but they could also be valuable to humans. And I think at the end of the day, we have to remember that we're all connected, and there's not only this inherent value in parrots, but also about great value in the relationships that we have with them, both personally and at the global, you know, ecosystem and ecological scale. So sorry, that was long-winded, but the students in your class are helping go through some of the papers that are out there so we can work on line by line documenting every single one of those foodstuffs that has been reported as being consumed by cockatoos. So I'm really excited to
Yes.
see how that progresses.
Yeah, and our students are excited about teasing out that information so that we can continue to build this database that helps us better serve our birds by knowing what they've evolved to eat, right?
Mhm.
And it's Providence that we have a cockatoo joining us today, and we'll introduce. Is it Woody?
It's Woody.
We'll
Yep.
introduce Woody in a minute. But yeah, so Bonnie Zimmerman was nice enough to share, a sample list of foods that they see these birds eating, and you can see nuts, flowers, pods, fruit with seeds, flowers, nuts, fruits and nuts, seed pods, all kinds of different things that take on all different shapes and sizes and textures and colors. And if you look at this, you have to ask yourself, am I feeding my bird things similar to this? Because like their beaks and everything are made to consume foods like this. So how can we increase their foraging in getting them to eat a variety of foods? And coconuts are one of those things, which I love to share these pictures because Bonnie goes, these cockatoos are filthy. They're always filthy. They put their whole head in this coconut and they burrow in. But coconuts are something that's accessible, and offering them a whole coconut, even if it's just one from the grocery store, where you just, smash it with a hammer and give them the pieces and let them have at it. There's something to be said about, offering those natural enrichment types of things. Plus, coconut has a lot of benefits when it comes to nutrition. So, but today we're joined by Shelley, and Shelley has been just this wealth of information because she lives among parrots, not just in her home, but in her neighborhood. So Shelley, would you introduce yourself, give a little bit of your background, and you have to introduce Woody, of course.
Okay, so I'm a bird enthusiast, I suppose. That's really where my job ends. But I have been involved with birds since we bought my son a hand-raised musk lorikeet, I'd say probably about 10 years ago. So I'm not that far in, but the journey started from there, and this little musk lorikeet really opened my eyes to the bird world. I always say it's not me that's teaching people, it's the birds that are teaching me by their behaviors, and there's a bond and a trust thing that goes on that I learned very quickly. And so I'm going to just a part of what I do as well is I do a lot of walking around where I live in Adelaide in southern Australia. And we have so much bird life here. I went to America recently on a holiday for 4 weeks, and I was just surprised at how quiet the skies were. There just wasn't parrots everywhere. And here, everywhere you go, you hear the parrots. It's just absolutely beautiful. There's hundreds of thousands of them, they're just everywhere in all the trees. And so, having the ability to be able to go walking, and I'm an observer. So, because I love birds, I notice them and I sit and I watch, and there's so many things that I picked up. But I just wanted to introduce Woody as a starting point. So Woody is a juvenile galah, and as you can see, absolutely loves scritches. He I do free flight training with my birds. So we've got macaws and cockatoo, Major Mitchell cockatoo, now called the pink cockatoo. So they out free flying every day. Well, every day that we can when it's not too windy or rainy. So by doing that, I've got a lot of people on my Facebook page, and one of the people that is on my page, she is connected to one of the rescue centres here in Adelaide. It's a Koala and Wildlife Rescue Centre. So they contacted me and said they've got this beautiful galah that someone's lost and was handed in, and they can't find the owners, and would we take him on? So we're going to try and do free flight training with him. But at the moment, he is just the snuggliest, cuddliest little galah. They're not normally this cuddly. So we think that he's come from a very beautiful family who would be missing him, and we would still love to find them. But in the meantime, he's absolutely a joy to have. But so look, so as a starting point, what I'm just going to go through today is just some observations. And I was just saying earlier as well that it surprises me that when you have a look and you observe what the birds do in the wild and what they consume in the wild, it's so different to what we've ever been told or taught about, owning a bird in captivity. And it makes sense to me that, and I haven't been to university, I haven't studied birds professionally, but it just sort of makes sense where if birds are thriving so well in the wild, why would we not replicate, what they're doing in the wild to give them, the best opportunity of being healthy and happy. So I've taken a few shots while I was out and about, and one of these shots here that I've got is the lorikeets, I suppose, that surprised me the most. I was always told that lorikeets live on nectar and fruit. They're nectar and fruit eating birds. They don't eat seed because it will affect their brush tip tongues. And everything that I've seen, I mean, I do put seed out for the birds. I live opposite a park, and I put seed out for the cockatoos every day. And every day the rainbow lorikeets come down and they eat the cockatoo seed. So there's plenty of flowering gums here. So there's plenty of nectar for these birds, but they also, need other sustenance. And I'm gathering, and you could probably correct me if I'm wrong, Evie and James, but, carbs is a big part of their diet as well, to have carbohydrates through seeds. I'm not sure, but so they will eat they break open the sunflower seeds, and they actually eat the sunflower seed in the middle, and then they eat the I think it's what are those tiny little ones? I can't remember what the name is. But so this slide just is depicting where I've thrown seed out for the cockatoos, and the lorikeets have just come down and honed in as well. But if you want to go to the next slide, Jason.
Have you seen lorikeets eat any wild occurring seeds or just
Yes.
supplemental seeds? So you have seen
I
both.
have, yeah. I have got that in these slides as well.
Okay, awesome.
So this is the next slide. So there's different types of she oak. We call them she oak trees here in Australia. And these are the tall she oak trees. And this is actually taken from a video, because one night I was walking across this path and there was thousands of rainbow lorikeets in the top of these she oak trees. And they don't have any flowers with nectar, these trees. And I just sort of thought, what are they doing up there? It was on dusk, so it's feeding time. And there was plenty of flowering gums around at this time of the year as well. And so I just sat and I observed them. And what they are doing is they're actually the she oak trees, before the fruit get bigger, they have they're quite small, and they actually chew the small fruit before, and it's not really fruit, it's quite dry. And I've got a picture showing you, but
you're talking about the little cones, the round cones
they
have
look
the little
like
wing,
pine
they have the
cones.
little winged seeds inside after they mature, right?
Tiny seeds inside.
Yes,
That's exactly
yes.
right. Yeah.
Yeah.
And the other thing that they do is these trees quite often have a lot of little bugs, on the trees, and they do eat those bugs. And then just, picking at the bark and picking at the leaf, they're not really leaves. They've got those long, piney
Needles.
leaves as well, and they chew on those. I'm not exactly sure what they eat on those. So the whole part of that tree they're engaging with. So there's no nectar or sweetness out of any of these trees. It's like, something I was really surprised about, that there was so many. They were full, of parrots. So if we go onto the next slide.
We have these here in some places. We just call them Australian pines, but they're the same. They're she oaks, or I've heard another name for them. I just
Casuarina?
lost it. Casuarina, yeah.
Oh,
And
yes.
that's what they call those little round. They look like pine cones, but they're little.
Yeah.
They're round. They're about that big. And I talk to people all the time because you'll see large cockatoos eating these cones, but what they're doing is they're shaving off the outside to get to the tiny seeds. And I tell people all the time, these big parrots eat little seeds, like they eat little tiny, and that's what that tongue is for, to manipulate those. So this is really cool, those cones that they produce. But I never thought about, I guess, giving them the immature cone, and they're probably eating something, getting something out of that as well. So that's really neat.
Yeah. So I zoomed in, and I'm sorry that this isn't clearer. So you'll see that, this lorikeet is just, he's, I don't even know what he's eating, but it looks like he's just eating these, these pine sort of branches and things. So yeah, it was just quite interesting. There was no actual fruit or cones on this branch that he was eating either. So I wish I was able to I only had my phone on me, so it would be nice to have a camera to be able to get up close and actually observe. But so that's just one, small example of just stopping and observing and having a look. I've got the she oak tree straight across the road from my house as well, and at a certain time of year the trees get full. So, and I'm sure it's from those, the little casuarina cones when they're small, and when they've just opened up to, when the seeds start to open up. So
yeah, I've actually harvested branches and freeze dried the branches with the long, because they've got these really long, soft pine needles, and giving those to birds, they love them. They love to forage with them, and that's not something I would typically think as pine needles being a food, but they're acidic, so they probably have a pretty potent taste to them.
I wonder if there's any kind of like sap or residue that is produced on the leaves. I mean, so from the alternate foodstuffs paper, we know that a lot more parrots eat foliage than we previously realized, and lorries are included in this, and it's not something we, like you have pointed out, necessarily think about with lorries. And it again, it's like, what are they eating in these things? But there's been so little done in terms of nutrient analysis, or, even if they're not actually eating the full needle, but they're chewing on it and getting some botanical or phytochemicals from it. If you did a crop content analysis on a macro scale, you would not detect that, because it's just the juices. But clearly, they're spending all this time up there and eating some of these other things that aren't going to show up as something obviously different from nectar or pollen, because it kind of might look like just a white goop, right? At the point it's been chewed up enough.
And the she oak trees predominantly are quite sticky, so
They
they
are.
do need sap. Yeah, especially when you're trying to take the ripe fruit or little pine cones off. They are sticky, and they do smell, like quite sappy. Yeah.
Well, and the other possibility here, I'm wondering, in term also eating, but if they are really pungent, if there's any insecticide properties of those pine needles, so it's possible that they're chewing on that. Because yeah, pine is like really.
Yeah.
I'd love to know. I want to get some for my lorries now.
Yes. Or they, like you say, if they're, so this is an example of the size that I've observed that they like to eat. So the smaller ones are, obviously the larger pine cones. Oh, I shouldn't say pine cones because they're not pine cones, but fruit obviously that hasn't developed yet. But all of my birds, cockatoos and the lorikeets and conures, they all love those smaller ones, and they are everywhere on the ground underneath these trees. So it's quite easy to pick them up as well. But yeah, as you were saying, Jason, as well, the big ones, and you can see that these ones here in the photo have opened up, but when they're closed, you can see that that's just the tiniest little tiny seeds. But all the birds do love those seeds as well. So yeah, it's so interesting. And the black cockatoos, which I've got a picture later on in these slides, especially the red-tailed blacks. In South Australia, we've got a subspecies of red-tailed blacks predominantly on Kangaroo Island, and there's a specific she oak tree or casuarine. It's called a drooping she oak, and the drooping she oaks are what the red-tailed blacks and yellow-tailed blacks, it's their main source of diet, and these trees are everywhere over here. And in fact, there's I was talking to someone over in Kangaroo Island, and they're what are they doing? They're actually pulling down a lot of some of these trees from a certain area, and I'll try to get my hands on them because they're full of these fruit. But it's just to get over. I'm about 100 kilometers from Kangaroo Island. To get over there is about $400 each way. So it's so expensive. Yeah, there's one ferry that takes less than an hour, but it's so just the cost, it's such a shame because these birds, all over the world, they just would thrive. So, but anyway, that gives you a bit of an example of what they're chewing on and eating. You would never think. I have never read it anywhere or seen it anywhere. So.
And I see the drooping ones here, the she oaks. They're very shaggy and very dense, lots of needles. And I'll harvest those. They're very easy to sanitize and freeze dry for birds, but there's something about them the birds like, and we need to pay attention to that for sure.
Yeah, well, it's interesting because the large she oaks are where the lorries, predominantly at dusk and dawn are feeding, and then the drooping small she oaks are where the cockatoos head for. So they're a different fruit for those two, that targets those two different species. So it's so interesting. So this is sorry, Avian.
I'd love to do a nutrient analysis on some of those fruits.
Oh yeah, that'd be so amazing. Absolutely.
Well, and that temporal isolation where they eat it at different times, different species eat at different times to reduce competition between them is something also that we need to consider for the future, right? Because if lorries are exclusively eating unripe cones, right? Before they even open, that should tell us something. There might be a reason why they're eating some of those, but then it might be because they can't compete with other birds that eat them once they're open. So there's a lot that could be happening there. That's fascinating.
It's so interesting, isn't it? So one of the things I was talking to Jason about is that, there's a lot of people that own galahs, and in Australia, they are absolutely everywhere. They cover the oval, like the football ovals and things here. You'll see them in, huge flocks. And I noticed that most people will just feed their galahs a seed-based diet. And so, sort of, which surprised me because I've never actually really seen galahs in the wild eating seed. They don't. I grow sunflowers because obviously I've got birds, and then the sunflowers fall in the ground and I let them grow. And every now and then I'll get the sulfur crest, the yellow crest cockatoos come down, but the galahs never come down to try and eat the seeds out of the sunflower. They spend all day grazing these ovals, and I just thought I'd send you some photos. So I have done a little bit of husbandry research on the galahs, and they do love we've got kikuyu on our ovals over here, and they've got the big white succulent runners, like they're very juicy. And so what I've read up about these runners is that they are very, very sweet, and they give the birds energy. So it rehydrates them, they're sweet, they taste delicious. And so I imagine that that's what they mostly are getting out of those particular runners. But in this instance, I was on actually, I was just going for a walk on a track, and I noticed these birds were like pulling at we call them sour sobs. It's like clover with the yellow flowers. I'm not sure if you get those, and they're very sweet, and you can, suck them. As kids, we used to suck them, and they were sweet. But these guys were actually eating the new flower pods before they were flowers. So, and I've got another little picture, and they were just absolutely loving it. So you'll see here, before they turned into the yellow flower, they opened right up. They were just eating at that point there, and I zoomed right in on them, but I couldn't get a very good shot. And I'd never really seen them eat anything like that before, probably because I wasn't really observing it. But I thought that was interesting. Just to note is so now when I go out and I see them, I pick handfuls of them and bring them into my guys, and they love them. So
yeah. So there's something to be said for eating flowers and buds, which Evie, your paper saw some of that, right? So
Yeah.
there's definitely there's definitely opportunities we may be missing there.
This immature fruit and flower, I realize, we've seen a lot of things about shoots, but these, including the runners, which are searching for nutrients and water, but not fully solidified into like the kind of woodier typical foliage that we think of as maybe being edible. But I wonder what's going on with this, with the previous cone and now these flowers. Maybe there's not as much of the anti-herbivory compound loaded into the component once it's like fully opened up, but still dense enough with nutrients, or maybe it's just sweeter, or but yeah, it's really interesting that they're targeting these immature things. I'd be curious to see what other kind of immature things they're going for.
Yeah, and the runners are really interesting.
Mhm.
And people probably would know runners from strawberries because they put out runners to grow new strawberries in another place. So there are those kind of stem-like things that run across the soil and then drop roots. And we see that with all kinds of different things that we offer, ginger and turmeric roots and things like that. So there's definitely ways that you can mimic something like that.
Yeah, and you're right, Jay. So when I pull the runners, I pull the dirt, the
Yeah,
roots, everything
yeah.
out for my birds. So they not only just eat those runners, they eat the roots, they eat the dirt as well, and any bugs that are in that dirt,
Yeah, yes,
they'll chew on.
yes.
So a lot of people, they'll just go and well, I shouldn't say a lot of people, but I've noticed that, and especially my dad, because he's a bird lover as well. He just grabs the top of the plant and pulls out. I'm like, the whole plant, Dad. You need to get the roots and everything up.
Yes.
They'll consume the lot, so
Get the whole meal.
Yeah.
yeah, that's right.
Well,
So
and over here, dandelion is really the plant that has those properties, like the entire plant from root to flower, everything in between, all edible. All of the parts have different, health properties that are really beneficial. Dandelion root is used for all kinds of things, including, liver and kidney health and things like that. So definitely have benefits for birds too. Yeah, that's really interesting. I'm sure some people are listening to this, clutching their chest, going, "I can't believe she just said she feeds them dirt." But that's something that Dr. Evie and I have been talking about for some time, is creating some kind of geophagy product that has soil and minerals and things like that, because we know these birds, I mean, all of them are eating some element of this in the wild, whether it be from the soil or the clay licks or whatever it may be, but they're consuming all of these things. So we're definitely talking about that. Evie, we need to revisit that really soon, because we just keep getting reinforced to produce something that would be
Yeah.
really great for birds.
Yeah, I have to say, every morning, most mornings I'll go and pick grasses with roots and dirt for all of my birds. I've got 14 birds. They're all, I shouldn't say hand reared, but they're anyway. So instead of as a part of their morning routine, they all love their morning dirt, roots, grass. The grass is full of, of all that succulent juices and things like that. So, and it keeps them busy,
Yeah.
first thing in the
But they
morning.
they
So
spend time working through it and grabbing little things here and there and throwing it on the ground and going to go get it. And there's like a whole process involved.
Yeah.
that's it. Yeah, it keeps them busy too. It keeps their minds busy rather than just going to a bowl and picking out what they need. So, but I especially found as well, over here we're going into spring, and a lot of our birds, I've got gravel down on the bottom of the cages. And a lot of the birds are going down to the bottom and picking up the gravel and chewing on those at certain times of the year and getting in under the gravel. So, there's different times of the year, I think, where they're getting different things out of, what the ground, what they need for, I don't know if whether they're guts or, what, so on and so forth. But yeah, again, just observing, different parts. So interesting. So
Sure.
anyway, that's that one. This is across the road. This is a park that's directly across the road from my house, and there's obviously a flock of galahs. They're sitting under a white cedar tree, and the cedar fruit, which in this tree that you can see, is it's old fruit, so it's been on the tree for a very, very long time. When it's green and it starts to ripen and it's full of leaves in the middle of summer, the trees are covered in galahs. And I've read that the nuts inside the fruit are actually toxic, but the birds actually do eat them. So I'm wondering if there's only a very small amount of toxicity. I'm not sure, or whether I've read that article and it's not quite correct. So Evie, that's probably something along your lines of finding out exactly. But the white cedar fruit, all my guys love them, all my bigger birds, I should say, except for the lorries. They don't really eat them. But and if you go to the next slide, Jason, I just honed in because you can see they're chewing on the ones that have dropped on the ground.
Oh,
So,
yeah.
and that would be because there's probably not a lot of food around. So they're using the older fruit, as a I suppose, a top up. Yeah, so that's, yeah, they're over there now chewing on this
Yeah.
older fruit. So yeah, white cedar trees and fruit is, a big one for them as well.
So this may be an example of coevolution. In biology, coevolution means that organisms adapt to each other. So if a tree starts producing toxin, in order to survive, some things that eat it may, be able to, they evolve to be resistant to that. There's a famous example with a snake and a type of salamander, and the salamander evolved to be toxic, and the snake evolved to withstand that toxicity. So, their evolution is an arms race, kind of, so these things produce a toxin. Some animals are going to be resistant to that, and then that helps them survive. And then they're eating a food source that others can't eat, so that helps them even, survive even more. So it's very much natural selection at work. But when these organisms kind of evolve to each other, in response to each other's process of evolution, I guess you could say, that's probably an example of this. Because we know that parrots in South America consume toxic nuts, and they can't eat too much. So they'll eat some from a tree and then they'll move on to something else because they know their limit, I guess you could say. I mean, we assume they know their limit, but this might be an example of that, that they've evolved to eat this toxic food, even though others can't. So.
And is it only the galahs that are going after this, or do you see other, I know you said the lorries don't seem to like it that much. So do you see others?
I haven't noticed the corellas. We get a lot of corellas here eating them, and I haven't noticed the sulfur crests eating them. So yeah, it's just the galahs, particularly because they're always there eating them.
Huh.
They're
So
always.
and in that case, it could be something that the galahs are better adapted to, and it's a food source that the other cockatoos are more sensitive to.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's another interesting example of how important it is to know your species natural history, because it may be very specific, in this sense. Now, you said you feed your other cockatoos this though, your other birds, and they're fine
Yeah,
with it?
so we've got a macaw. So our macaw loves loves them. And,
Interesting.
and I've got baffle cages. So I'll pick the fruits that they're on and stuff them into the bag. So it gives them something, it's like pulling off little balls and they throw them
Yeah.
around, and
Yeah.
a lot of the time they're just on the ground, you haven't been touched. So so our macaw loves them. Our Major Mitchell cockatoo loves them. Obviously, the galah loves them. And then I've got the conures, like the sun conures, and they'll pick at them, but it's not, it's just more for something to do, really. I think for them, it's just, a bit of a game and something to do. But and yeah, I'm just trying to think what else. That's yeah, more the sun conures, not really the green cheek conures. They're a little bit big for the green cheeks, but
Yeah.
yeah, once they've had too many of them, then they leave them alone. They get a bit bored of them, or so it's not, the favorite part of
Yeah.
that's
And are your birds actually breaking open the inner nut inside, or are they eating the flesh, or both?
So they predominantly will eat the flesh. Our macaw will break open the nut because he just has got that power, it's something, I think it's something to do for him. But not on all of them. So, when I sweep the floors, I'll see that there's just the nuts left over everywhere as well.
Okay.
So it's the fruit around the outside. But when they're green, they don't really eat them when the fruit is ripe, like you can see on the ground. It's
Oh,
when they're
interesting.
green. Yeah. Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah,
Yeah.
because I would assume the toxin's probably in the nuts, so the flesh, they're taking advantage of the flesh, and if
But of
South
course, the
American birds
macaw
are
would,
eating.
but of
I'm
course, the
sorry.
macaw would be the one
Yeah,
to crack the nut for fun, and it probably doesn't taste good.
yeah,
Like it
yeah,
probably feels good for the crunch, but that's
yeah.
that behavioral enrichment. And then you taste it and spit it out. Spit the
Drop it
rest
out. You drop it on the ground. There's a lot of half nuts on the ground, that's for sure. Yeah.
I
out.
I really think birds know. I really think they
Yeah.
know. What I think there's definitely plant compounds that are signals, and these birds have ways to really they use their senses to detect some of these things, even if they're not a native bird.
Yeah. I mean, it's gotta be.
Yeah.
That's so interesting.
Oh,
Um,
beautiful.
Ooh, oh,
This
this
is
looks like
just, I
heaven.
can smell this picture.
Mhm. This is fabulous. Yeah.
So this is just, I just wanted to put this as an example. So it takes me maybe an hour to pick, a 20-kilo box full of wild, natives here. It's everywhere. And so, and I just throw it out to my guys. At the moment, it's just drying in that room. And so I always give one of the birds, like, they can, well, that's Woody's cage in the background. So he comes down and has taste tests. He eats everything that's there, He'll pick and chew, and it's amazing because we can't see, I don't see what they eat when they're high up in the trees, but they, he chews on all of the flower pods and the branches and the leaves, and pretty much everything. So I just thought I'd give it an example. It's a lovely thing to be able to just, in Australia, we are so lucky. We can just go and just pick a piece of a tree and put it in the cage, and that's it for the day. It doesn't take very long. Most people will go for a walk. It's just so easy.
Yeah.
But what I have read in some of the posts, which forums and things, which really surprises me, and Jason, you've been a wealth of information for this, is that people are getting natural branches and they're talking about washing it or putting it in the oven or baking it and getting all these things out. And I don't do any of that. The birds, I don't know if it's different over there, or you're just there's people aren't exposed to hundreds of thousands of birds around every day. But we just put everything in the cages as is, making sure that there's no feces or anything, on the branches. We've never had an issue. The birds have never got sick over it or anything like that, and they do tear it the whole lot. They don't leave any part untouched. So so it's just a
Yeah,
Yes.
I think there's a lot to be said with just a thorough rinsing and UV light in the sun, just laying it out in the sun for a little bit.
Yeah.
UV light kills this stuff, right? Like, I mean, it kills virus, it kills these things. And so there's a reason why you're not going to have cross contamination most of the time, most of the time, as long as, like you said, there's no feces on it. But I think people get a little, they want this sterile environment for their birds, and I don't think that's beneficial. When you look at pine cones, I tell people, if you just leave pine cones in the sun for a day, like, they're good. Like, you don't have to worry too much about it. If they look soiled, throw them away. Don't use anything that's soiled. But you can tell if there's something on them. I think there's a misunderstanding as far as like people thinking that like there's viruses that are going to kill their birds just crawling around on the leaves. Like, that's not how it works. it's
Yeah.
it's very much like, if there's feces there, you don't use it, and if they're good, just rinse them and put them in the sun for a little bit, and that's helpful.
So when you say rinse them, just with fresh water, because I
Yeah,
know people
I
can
mean,
put
because
vinegar, or there's
yeah,
different
I mean,
to add.
I don't think you have to use, I don't use a surfactant for a lot of things. I harvest banana leaves because I have banana plants growing in my yard, and the big broad leaves are a huge enrichment tool. I can just throw one on my cockatoo's cage and he'll spend all day shredding it and pulling it into the cage. But I freeze dry it too, so that, because it's beautiful, it's very fibrous, and you can peel it into strips. And even when it's freeze dried, the birds can peel it into strips and chew on it. And the midrib of the leaf is very big, and it's crunchy when it's fresh, and it's also crunchy when it's freeze dried. So I just literally take my sprayer outside and spray it off with the hose, both sides. I make sure there's nothing soiled on it, and then I just leave it out in the sun to dry a little bit, and I know it's good to go. So,
Yeah, awesome.
I think a lot of people will use vinegar, but vinegar is acidic, and that doesn't take off like pesticides and things like that they may worry about on their produce. But baking soda will, because it's basic, and baking soda gets rid of like 99%, according to research, of pesticides and fungicides. So like that's a helpful tool for that. But for wild forage, a thorough spray. And honestly, I like to give this stuff to birds wet too, because the birds roll around in it and bathe in it, and they have a field day. So I think we worry a little bit too much about this giving your birds things that are just sterile. It gets to the soil idea too. Like, oh, there's bacteria in the soil. We consume bacteria.
Oh.
Organisms consume bacteria all the time. That's beneficial to us. So, pathogenic bacteria is one thing, but that
Right.
comes in very specific sources that we all know to avoid. So,
Yeah, that's amazing. And I mean, we've got a little cockatiel as well, and the little cockatiel munches on the, some of the really larger eucalyptus pods, just slowly, chews just the outside, just everything. They try everything. So it's not just
yeah.
for the big guys, it's for the little guys as well.
And a question, like in the lower left corner here, there's a Hakea branch, and I
Yes.
see a little white pod, like an undeveloped Hakea pod.
Yeah.
Do you see birds eating those, destroying those at all?
Not the white ones. So the white ones are the hard nuts, like the
Yeah.
hard that carry that seed. And then you've got the flower pod, which as you can see, probably if you honed in, you'd be able to see that little, just down there. So
Oh, yeah.
that's a seed pod, that white one, and then the little round one there is a flower pod. So two they eat the flower pods.
Yes.
And the only birds that can get through, well, is the cockatoos. When those Hakea seed pods are so hard, and the macaw just absolutely loves it, and a major Mitchell cockatoo can get through them as well. But the other birds, there's just no chance. So they're a great.
As some of the stuff is so incredibly hard. I think Jason, you sent me something that I was just trying to see if I could crack it open, and I was out there with a hammer, and it was like sparks flying, and I was like, "How is it?"
Oh, that was a raffia nut. Yeah, because those
Yeah,
come like, they're big nuts, and
yeah.
they're very, very hard. But I don't care that the birds don't eat them. I want the birds to just enjoy working on them, and
Mhm.
I give my black palm cockatoo, I give him all kinds of things that I know he won't eat, but he will work at it
Yeah,
and
to work
really
at it.
keep
Yeah.
his brain moving. And you watch his tongue, and it's just manipulating everything.
Everywhere.
That's what we should be focused on.
Yeah.
And
Absolutely.
and that's why diversity in the diet is critical, because giving them one type of food, one shape of food, one food that tastes the same, it's boring. Like, that would be if you eat the same exact thing every single day for your whole life. It's boring. Like, we need to keep birds engaged, and that's why diversity is so important. But this picture is just beautiful. I mean, this is exactly what these birds need, is to be foraging. And I'm glad we have access to eucalyptus and things like that we could provide people, even freeze dried, just so their birds can have that experience. So
Yeah,
yeah.
absolutely. I just put this picture in because I'm so proud of all the gallards that come down every day. This is my front yard. So twice a day I put seed out for them, and twice a day they come down. They're absolutely beautiful. Anyway, we can move on to the next one.
And I used to breed these pigeons.
Oh, did you really? The
Yes.
top knots.
Yes.
Ah.
What do we call them? Australian horned pigeon here? Is that, wait a minute, what did they call them? I think we might have called them that. But yeah, we had breeding success with them. They were fun.
They
Oh
look cool.
yeah, they're everywhere here. So yeah, so this is the last slide. So this is just the one where you know, obviously the red-tailed black cockatoos, this is their staple diet, is the fruit of the she oak tree. And you know, there's so many of these beautiful birds around the world, and they just don't have access, you know, to these little fruits and things here. And yeah, you're right, Jason, the size of the seed in each of those little grooves on that fruit, or those little pine cones, is so small. So you can imagine, you know, how long it takes them to get through. You know,
Oh,
it'll take hours in a day, you know, to keep themselves busy,
sure,
to just
sure.
feed themselves. So and you can see down on this branch here on the left, it's got the tiny little
Mm-hmm.
that haven't properly developed yet either. So they don't eat those little ones. But yeah, so you know, I'd love to be, you know, it'd be so lovely to be able to get more of this produce out to these, you know, these beautiful birds that I know are around the world everywhere, that just don't have access to it. But how you do that is the
That's
tricky
what we're
part.
doing. We're
Yeah, it's the
trying. We're
tricky
trying to
part.
get it out there. Freeze drying has been just a gift. So
Yeah.
you can get these things to people, even red, like the red palm nuts, the queen palm nuts, things like that we have here in Florida are natural food for so many South American birds, that we can now freeze dry those so that they'll last longer and they won't, go bad, and get to people so that they can get them to their birds so they have that experience. So this is another example of that. And look at those needles. There's just these long pine needles. And I love freeze drying these and giving these to birds, because you can just tell that there's something in there that they enjoy, and it smells great. It
Yeah,
smells
they do smell
smells so
beautiful.
good.
It
But
does.
it's similar to, when you're looking at the work that a bird has to do to get these tiny little seeds out of this, you know, and then you think about what you're feeding. Like, we need to give birds the challenge.
Mm.
And that's why I tell people sunflower seeds are amazingly healthy for birds, but you can't give them 2 dozen a day, right? A couple here and there with a bird that lives inside, more than enough. They get the benefit from it, but giving them, they need to work for their food. So giving them a challenge, which, this is a perfect example. How do I get all these little tiny seeds out of this cone? Um, we need to be thinking about, this is what birds are built to do. This is what they've evolved to do. We need to give them these opportunities. So
Yeah, and I think, you know, I think if we made it easy for people to be able to access this for their birds, that, you know, and I think that's where the big problem, we've got an abundance of this in Australia, and being able to just get that to, you know, most people are busy, they're working, and they don't have
yes,
time. You know, if they can just order it online and it lands up at their, you know, on their door to make it easier, then that's sort of half of the problem solved. But how do we, you know, how do we do that, and how do we do that on a large scale, and can we do that, and, you know, how are we affecting the biodiversity of, you know, of everything? So it's a tricky space to be, but, you know, that, I suppose that's really the responsibility of being a bird owner. If you take these birds on, then, you know, it's our responsibility to make sure they're getting, you know, the best of what they can in a,
absolutely.
you know, in their non-natural environment. So yeah.
That's awesome.
Hmm.
Yeah, I think it's interesting because in the last 100 years of aviculture and keeping birds, we've gone from, not having access or knowledge about what these birds are eating and the inability to grow them or the foods that they're eating in the wild. It's kind of just been grocery store availability or proxy, but now with everything, globalization and industrialization and a lot more research having been done in the realm of natural history and things like freeze drying and overnight shipping, and agriculture, all these things, it's kind of a reprogramming of we now know some of these things better and we can access them. So, kind of keeping abreast of new information that's coming out through if, for example, people like you, your experiences of these walks every day and seeing what they're eating that is missing from their captive diets, and not necessarily out of malice, but just out of habit and what's easily available, like you've said, and finding a way to sort of like bridge that gap of now it's available and a little more accessible, and how can we facilitate not only getting people to change the way they're feeding, but educating them about what they should be eating and not just going through the same old patterns of what I read in a little pamphlet from the pet store kind of thing, I guess.
Yeah. Anytime
Absolutely.
I see a one pager, I run the other way because I'm like, you can't sum this up in a one page. They
Yeah.
need
Yeah.
there's a lot of this. So, Shelley, what would you tell people about offering a diverse diet, offering browse and things like that, even if it's not native? Because, like you said, you feed it your South American birds, you feed these Australian natives to, and you know that they enjoy it and thrive. So, what would you tell people as far as what to do?
Well, so for somebody that's got a bird that's not used to it, the first thing is to observe, in nature, what other birds are eating, which birds are in the trees. So if
Mhm.
birds are in trees and you see them, foraging in the trees, well, you'll know that if a wild bird's doing that with all of the other trees that they've got available, then that tree's pretty safe. I know that the Australian natives are okay. So if do a Google search on what the tree is, but just understanding and being more observant about what around you, what the birds are doing. So if that bird's doing that, then it's generally okay for your bird. And if you're not sure, like Google's a great educator. You can take a photo, find out what the plant is, and get that through. But I always say that mimicking the birds as much as what you can in their natural environment is always the best. And you're
Yes.
not going to know what that is. So you need to find out what that might be and then start just small, start trying. Don't be afraid to try different things on a small basis. And you'll find out if they love it and if they don't. They won't touch it if they don't like it. And if they do, then you're on a winner. So it's exciting. It's like, it's like when you get a new washing machine and the first time you put your clothes, I sit there and watch the whole load sometimes the first time. It's the same thing where you're watching your bird, have the most awesome day because you've managed to provide something it's never had and it loves before. So yeah, so I suppose the big thing is don't be afraid to try something different. Don't be afraid to try and just understand that birds, they do get bored. Then it's up to us to create that environment in captivity to keep their minds busy as well as the food side of things.
Yeah, and giving them a chance. So many times I've seen people give them a new food item and they're like, well, doesn't like it, so that's it, I'm done trying, and it's like, no, they've got to get exposed to it. They may have never seen that before. They may not know that's a food item, and there's ways to experiment to get them, to take to those. So it's
That's
Well,
important
that's
that
yeah,
we,
that's
it's
true.
It's the same thing as like when you get a new toy, sometimes you have to hang it on the outside of the cage, or if your bird's like a really nervous bird, you may have to put it across the room to initially expose the bird to it. And the other thing is there may be, throughout the year changes in their metabolism or nutrient requirements as they go through their reproductive cycles that may drive certain hungers at times and not others. So just because in one part of the year your bird doesn't maybe seem interested in something doesn't mean it'll never be interested.
Right. Right.
They have to go through a lot to accept a novel item that they haven't been taught to use. So, if it's new and your bird's a little bit of, more on the nervous thing, you spend some time picking at it and playing with it. Have your bird come out with you and put it on your shoulder or pretend like you're eating it, do all the things because they are such strong social learners. And even though they've been evolving for millions of years to eat these things, they haven't had all those exposures to new items that they would have had from a young age as young birds. So it's your job as a parent guardian to help them experience those things, especially if you have a younger bird, make sure you're exposing them to as many new things as you can. And if you have an older bird, just be patient with them. They learn to be excited about new things. If you're excited about new things, it may take time, but I guarantee you with some patience and persistence and love and guidance, they're looking to you as part of their flock. They'll start trying things, and maybe they won't eat everything, all over that you offer them, but that's okay if they're trying, and even if they're not eating it, they're engaging with it and checking it out. Even just speaking it, even if they're throwing it on the ground. Parrots are so messy in the wild. If you go see what you just see devastation under trees sometimes when they're out there. That's just part of what they do. So let them do it.
But the key word you used is learning. And we need to put ourselves in those shoes. How often do you learn something the first time you see it? Right? Usually it takes practice, and we need to give our parents that grace. I think it's really, really important. And the more different things that they're exposed to, the more apt they are to be okay with change. And I think we tend to, especially with African grays, shy away from that because we're worried that we're going to stress them out with change. But we need to expose them to change so that they're not stressed out later, right? It's being proactive versus reactive. And I think, Shelley, what you're talking about and knowing what they eat in the wild, that natural history is so important. And you can find videos of parrots foraging in the wild and look what they do. I just shared recently a video of two blue and gold macaws in the wild eating mushrooms right off the side of a tree. And I had people angry that I shared it. And I'm like, why are you angry? Like, this is great. This is great exposure to what they really do.
Yeah.
And it gets to that whole myth about mushrooms are all bad and toxic and all this ridiculous. There's no basis for this. We just heard it somewhere, so we're going to perpetuate this myth. We know that they eat them in the wild. Same thing with insects. We know they eat them in the wild. We know they eat them from the soil. We know they eat them from tree bark. Like, it's just part of their natural history. So research what they do, and that's why I'm thrilled to be working with Dr. Evie on her parrots project, so our students can help tease that information out of the research and help us build a better database of knowledge. So, and that's, Shelley, what you're doing is part of that. So we really appreciate you being part of this. But
Thank you.
diversify.
That's right. Yeah, no, actually, just a quick one. I did get a couple of sun conures, which were a breeding pair that had a really high sugar diet where they come from, and it took them about 6 months every day. I was putting in what I had with all the other birds. It did take them about 6 months to actually start changing the way that they just didn't know how to forage, or try different things. So you're absolutely right. It's just consistency and persistency. Persistency is
we make it too easy. We just put food in a bowl and be like, there, it's nice and easy. We need to make them work. We know from research, we know that animals like to work for their food. They like to be engaged. They like their brains working. So yeah, it's a shame that we have to teach birds to forage.
Yeah, that's for sure. So going back to parenting 101, but for parrots.
Yes, exactly.
Parenting 101. I love it. Exactly.
Well, thank you so much, Shelley, for being part of this. I'm
you.
sure we will bring you back and we'll talk more about other things that you notice in the wild. I love getting a firsthand picture of like really what's going on in a place that's completely different than where we live. But we really appreciate that. So this is episode 8. You can find us at Avian Nutrition Podcast on YouTube. We also have the Avian Raw Whole Food Group if you want to join that to learn more about diversifying your diet. And thank you so much. I'm Jason Crean.
Dr. Evie Voltura.
And I'm Shelley, and thank you for
and
having us.
Yes, thank you so much. We'll talk soon. Thanks.
Thanks.